Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name's Jackie Decker. For those who I haven't had the chance to meet, I'm the intermediate secondary math consultant with Limestone. And so I do a lot of work with grade 9 to 12 math educators, grade 9 in particular, but also lots of K to 12 work in the math world. And in the NTIP world, I get to work with teachers that are new to our board from K to 12 and leading some professional learning for them as well. So that's who I am and where I come from. And recently I decided that I was going to teach summer school so that I could figure out what online learning might look like and to experience it from a teacher's perspective. And so what I want to do this morning is share with you some of the things that I tried to do, how that went, things I might do a little differently. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the planning decisions I made prior to and some of the things that happened while I was teaching summer school online. And so for the first little bit, I'm just going to give you a little preamble. And if you ever have a question, pop it in the chat. Christy Wilson is here as well. She and I were on the math team together last year. She's an intermediate educator currently at Molly Brandt, and she's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, you can either turn on your mic and just ask the question, which is I'm super happy to pause and to answer any questions. Or if you're more comfortable, just throw it in the chat and Christy will let me know and she'll interrupt me and say, Jackie, there's a question we need to deal with. So whichever way makes the most sense for you, please do whatever you're most comfortable with. So, oh, I've got somebody coming in, sorry. There we go, one more person in. Welcome to those of you who have just arrived. So I'm gonna begin by talking to you about the planning I did for this course. So in summer school, I was teaching grade 10 academic math, and I have never taught that course before. So I did what we all do, and I started with some design down planning. I didn't have the chance to do a lot of collaborative design down planning because there was not a lot of turnaround time, but I did talk to some math friends over the phone to just make sure that what I was doing in my planning was really looking at those clusters of overall expectations that I could put together by looking for connections between concepts. And I was really trying to find those overall expectations that were the most important. So things that we needed students to really understand before they move on to grade 11. And so by taking both of those things and using my colored highlighters over here on my printed out curriculum documents like we all do, I came up with some big ideas, which I was then able to articulate as learning goals. And that was sort of the foundation for the course, which is a process we all go through. I just wanted to let you know that every time I start with a course, that's where I begin. And then I wanted to make sure that any planning I did was really focused on the goals. I wanted to focus on the why. I didn't want to go straight to, well, what tools am I going to use and how am I going to logistically do this? I really wanted it to be focused on the goals. And I thought, teaching online without having ever met these students in person, I really wanted to build some relationships with students. I wanted to engage them in the math. I was teaching a course where a lot of the students came to me having taken the course before and not been successful. And so I wanted to make sure that I engaged them in their learning. And then I wanted to empower them because math carries some baggage for some students sometimes. And so I wanted to make sure that anything I did was focusing on building relationships with students, engaging them in the math, and then empowering them to be learners. So how was I going to do that? That was my next question. How was I going to do this? So I was trying to think about all the things I would do in the classroom and then adding to that things I would need to do because we were online. So daily videos were something we were required to do in summer session, sort of outlining the day's expectations. Daily office hours were the way that we tackled synchronous learning in summer session. And email and phone calls became a really important tool for me to build those relationships. I've never been super great at the phone calls to parents, I must admit, but I got a lot better at it this year because it was a really great way to build those relationships and get that support at home. In terms of engaging students, I know what I think works in the classroom, and so I wanted to see what we could do. So I wanted to start with a problem, just like we often do in the class. I wanted some of those problems to be 3-act math tasks. I wanted to build on what students know. To help students be successful, I wanted to start where they were at and then build on that. And I knew I wanted to start with visuals because students that struggle in math, we know that visuals help all learners understand the math better. And so that was something that was really important for me. And then in order to empower those students, I really wanted to make sure that my problems were challenging. I heard some student voice during the spring, and I know that pandemic learning was very different than what happened in summer school and what's going to happen in the fall, but students still want to have that challenge. And I wanted to make sure they were exposed to a variety of math tools, one at a time, so that later they could select the tools that help them learn the best. And I wanted to consolidate using student work, just like we would in the classroom, selecting and sequencing great student work to help us consolidate learning. I really wanted to give frequent feedback. This was a huge goal of mine. And I wanted to have students reflect on their learning. So this was the how of how I wanted to empower those students as math learners in my course and moving forward. So then I was ready to actually choose the tech tools. What were the tools I was going to use to be able to do these? I used tools in Minds Online for some of it, and for a couple different places. And you can learn a lot about those tools. I'll show you the ones I used, and you can learn a lot about those in the Minds Online support course. I used Loom for my screencast video. They have quite a nice version that is free for educators. And I really like Loom over Screencastify, and I can show you a little bit later about why that is. I used Google Meet for my meetings, just like we are right now. Google Docs were something that I have continued to use. Google Jamboard, which I'm using right now to present, that was new to me. And I really like it for a lot of reasons, and I'll show you some more about that as we go through. Desmos Activities were a huge part of my practice, as well as the Desmos graphing calculator. And the online manipulatives that we used were algebra tiles because they work really well with grade 10, but manipulatives in general proved to be a really powerful tool. So before I go forward, I just want to pause. Are there any questions or comments? Either throw on your mic and speak out, or throw something in the chat if there's anything you're wondering about before I carry on. Okay, I'm going to carry on. So as I built my structure in Minds Online, I haven't used Minds Online to teach students. I've made a lot of resources for teachers there, but I hadn't taught students in it. So I really wanted to make sure whatever structure I created in Minds Online was going to help us be focused on these goals. And so what I came on was that each unit I was going to have the same structure. So each one was going to have explore the math, reflect on the math, consolidate learning, practice, and then a formative. And so every unit that I had those 5 steps in it. And each one began with the learning goals, which were stated as big ideas and I can statements, because we know those empower our students. Each of those units came from a cluster of overall expectations. And so my course was in 10 units. So in the content of the course, you'll see that there are a few introductory pieces, and then in each unit, there are those 5 topics, and there are 10 of those units here. I also did a little bit of simplifying. The nav bar up at the top in Minds Online can be a bit overwhelming, so I removed all the tools we weren't going to use to make it less overwhelming, so we focused on the things we needed to use to really focus on those goals that we had for our learning. I also did some simplifying of the landing page. And so one of the first things I did was I changed the activity feed to announcements. I prefer announcements for a number of reasons, but basically it keeps the most important information for the day front and center, and it goes from the most recent down to the least recent. I also added the updates widget. So anytime a student submits something, I can see it, I get a notification. And anytime I have given feedback to students, they will see that front and center on their page, so they know to go and check the feedback that they've been given. So that's how I basically designed the Minds Online platform to meet my goals. Before we move on to assessment, are there any questions about this? I know this is just a general overview, and later in the presentation, I'm going to get you to actually register yourself for my course so that you can click through and have a look at all of those pieces now. And after we leave as well, you can just stay in that course and have a look at how I actually built that. Any comments or questions before we move on? Feel free to put on your mic or to throw that in the chat. Okay, so of course, in my planning, I had to also think about assessment, and I really had a focus on formative assessment. So this is a picture or a screenshot of the tracking that I did. So Each of these lines is for a particular student, and I listed the tasks along the top. Every time I was giving feedback, I colored it blue so I could just keep track of how often I was giving feedback to students. And then I was just tracking student completion of their formative work, because I was afraid that if I waited until my first summative to find out that students weren't engaged, it'd be too late. And so I just put an X every time that they submitted something. I just always had this open so that I could see the students I needed to call or to email or to check in with, to see what was going on, what barriers they had to their learning, and how I could support them. You'll notice in some places there's a little ×2. Anytime that students took my feedback and then resubmitted something, that's how I annotated it just for myself. It was interesting to see. Sometimes I would say to a student, I think you misunderstood what I was asking. Please consider this feedback and resubmit. And sometimes they would ask me, can I use your feedback and resubmit so that I can do better next time? And it was really interesting to me how many students were using the feedback and then seeking more feedback. So that was what formative assessment looked like for me. A real focus on the formative task in each topic, but also sometimes the reflect task was where I was giving feedback, and that's often when I could learn about what students were understanding and what they still had questions about to help guide my teaching. For summative assessment, this is something that people ask a lot of questions about. How do we do summative assessment online or remotely? And so for the term work portion, I would cluster a bunch of overall expectations before I had a summative. So here we have 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, and then this first summative included those first 3 units. And that was a cluster that made sense. And what I decided to do was do 2 parts to that summative. So I did a Desmos activity. I really liked using Desmos activities for assessment because you can put visuals in there. Students can annotate those visuals. And it's a lot more interactive, and I can actually watch when students are working in a Desmos activity. I can see who's on which screen and what that looks like. And we can look at that a little bit more if people want to see a little more about Desmos activities. And then Google Docs I also used, and so students would have a Google Doc. They would click on the link. They would be given a template that they would complete, and they could write on it. They could write on a Jamboard and insert a screenshot. They could write on paper and insert a screenshot. There was a lot of choice there. And then they would just download that as a PDF and submit it to the assignment in Minds Online, which gave me access to all those tools in Minds Online where I could annotate and draw on there and write comments and give audio or video feedback if I wanted to let them know how they had done. And something I did that I have not done well before was on every summative, the very first question was, please tell me the most useful feedback I've given you. Then please tell me how you're going to use that feedback on this summative. And the students that could answer this question, because they had done the formative work in time to get that feedback before the summative, those were the students that achieved the best. This is what my mark book looked like. I think we're always curious about each other's mark books, so I thought I would share mine. So this is one page. I used Google Sheets. I put the big ideas across the top. The color coding has to do with the strand that those are in. I listed formatives as well as summatives so that we could see in each big idea how they did in formative and summative assessment. These formative grades were never given to students. That was for my records. Students were only given descriptive feedback. We know that when we give a mark and descriptive feedback, the students stop reading at the mark. So I didn't give them the mark. I just gave them the descriptive feedback because I wanted them to read it and to apply it. And asking them to reflect on that at the beginning of their summative seemed to help them use that feedback moving forward. And I did notice I chose, this is one student's page, and I chose it on purpose because this student did all the formatives. And you can see that in every big idea, they did better. So in that first big idea, they started with a 3+, moved to a 4, and on their summative got a 4+. And you can see their progress in each one. Or almost all of them, and some of them that progress was quite significant, which was really satisfying to see. I'm going to pause there. Questions about the term work summative assessment plan or the formative assessment? Okay. Final summative. I did this very differently than I have done in the past. I've worked with a lot of groups of teachers that have done this. This was my first time doing a portfolio of learning for my students instead of a final exam. And this was an incredible experience. So students had a portfolio that included two things. They were given this Google Doc, and the first half of it were content proof cards. So there were these cards. This is an example. This is number 1. And this is about the intro to linear and quadratic relations and comparing and contrasting those based on different models and representations. And students had to select some of their work and then reflect on why that work was good evidence of their learning. And there was one of these cards for every one of the most important big ideas. So all the math content, students had to select work to show me and tell me about their learning in math. The other half of the portfolio was about growth. And there were a number of cards, and they just had to choose 3 of them. So this one was I used to, and now I. There was a light bulb moment one. There was one about this work is refrigerator worthy because, or I have grown the most in. And they just chose the prompts that really spoke to them, and they told me about their growth. And then at the end of the course, I did give them feedback twice on their portfolio. So they had a chance to hand in just a couple of those prompts with the work so that I could give them formative feedback so they knew what was expected of them. I did a single point rubric here to give that feedback. So here's the criteria. I would tell them the strengths of their work, their next steps, before they had to hand that in as their final summative. So they had 2 chances for feedback first. And then we did an exit interview. And so during the exit interview, I asked them to speak about their portfolio and to add anything. And so I would mark it based on both their written work and their exit interview. And then the final thing I did was I collected some student voice. And I asked them what was most helpful to your learning. I explained to them that this was the first time I taught online and I'd like some of their feedback. And these were their answers. I'm not going to read these to you, but I want you to take a moment to read the student voice. I've organized it into topics afterwards, but all I said was what was most helpful to your learning, and this is what they told me. So have a read of that, and I'm just going to remain quiet while you do that. And then if you have a comment or a question about that, pop it in the chat or get your microphone off and let me know. Any questions or comments about the student voice on this screen? Maybe I'll ask this instead. I'm going to ask you to go into the chat and tell me which of those speaks to you the most. Mackenzie has a question. One of the comments mentions starting with a visual. Is that something I came up with? So often so this student is talking about the consolidation video. And generally in the consolidation video, I would select and sequence student work like we would in the classroom. And so I would often try to start that with a visual if possible. So if we're talking about some algebra, we would start with the algebra tiles before we moved to the more abstract algebraic representation. Or if we had done a 3-act math task, we would start with that visual before moving to the student solutions. We would often start with a graph before looking at the algebraic representation. I hope that answers the question, Mackenzie. Andrew, that's a really cool comment. Yeah, this student said to me, I didn't used to reflect on my work. I just wanted to know if I was right or wrong. I said, well, what does that mean for you? And she said, well, I'm just going to keep reflecting on my work, whether my teacher asks me or not, because that made me think about it more deeply. Right, the daily video. I think that was interesting too, because there were times when I wondered if my daily video was making a difference, but Dawn, you're commenting that the student did gain from that video, and a lot of students said that daily video just let me know what to do today. And then other students said, well, I actually like being able to plan out my week. So having both of them there met different learners where they needed me to meet them. They also told me about particular tech tools. So this is what they had to say about Jamboards, algebra tiles, and Desmos. Please continue to let me know either what your question is or the comment that's speaking to you there.
Jackie, there's a question about what's the length of the videos you presented at the start of each day?
Oh, hey, Brett, that's a great question. They were really short. Oh, I see that's Dawn's question. It kind of answers Brett's question too. So the daily video was, you'll see it when you pop in to have a look at the course, but they were like 1 to 2 minutes long. Super short. Sometimes they're a screencast video to say, hey, go into Desmos and do this, or go into the algebra tiles and try to build this. And sometimes it was just my face talking to them because they had never met me in person. So I wanted them to know who I was. I had to get over my discomfort of having myself on camera. But it was helpful because then we got to know each other a little bit and they could see there's a real person behind the course. And so it was brief. It just let them know what to do. And if there was something, sometimes I would throw in one later in the day too. If I would notice that, hey, everyone's having trouble on the formative for this, I would say, here's some hints or questions to ask yourself about the formative, or here's a place to go to get some more help on that. And I would post it in the content of the course, but I would also place it on that announcements page where I put the daily video just to make sure that was really clear to them. The online algebra tiles, Rosemary, there's a link in the course that you can go to. I found some that I liked better than Matthys, so I'll show you where those are once we get into the course. Oh, Sean can't see what I'm presenting. You can't see my screen. Is anyone else having the same trouble there? Christy, are you able to see my screen?
Yep, I can see you.
Okay. I'm almost done with this part of it, Sean. And so in the next step, we're going to be putting all of the links into the chat anyway. So as long as you can see the chat, you're going to be able to easily access the next thing we're about to move to. I just wanted to point out a couple things about the Jamboard. Students really liked being able to draw and write on it. They also liked that they could look at other student work. It was like having the vertical whiteboards in your classroom when students are working on something and they're a little bit stuck. Oh, Rosemary, that's awesome advice. So Sean, when you go to the very bottom of your screen and you get, you can't see it on mine, but you do get 3 dots at the bottom right. If you hover your cursor over the bottom of the screen and then change your layout, that is definitely going to do it. Thank you, Rosemary. I forgot about that. Back to the Jamboard, students were able to look around the room to see what others, or look around the Jamboard like they would look around the room when we have vertical whiteboard. So they liked that. And I also interacted with students. So I want to show you a couple quick examples of how I use the Jamboard. I'm going to start with this one. So I would have something set up on the Jamboard like this. I'm just using the laser tool down there. So this was all there for each student. And I had actually copied the instructions, a place to put their name, and the task I wanted students to do. Then I copied it to all the other screens. You kind of navigate up here. And then students could write on it. They could use different colors. They could draw on top of the pattern. We can see a student here showing me the constant in that pattern and showing their other thinking. And then I would just use the sticky note tool to give them feedback as they were working. And for some students, I wasn't anticipating this, but it just kind of happened that they would be working. And while they were working, and I would think this would be a really great way to do synchronous learning with your students. Give them a problem. You could have one student on a screen or several in a group, and they would be working away. And I could see them coloring and writing in real time. And this student said, Ms. Decker, I need help with pattern 4, please. And so this is a little messy, but these sticky notes were our conversation. So the first thing I said was, oh, just worry about the white squares. And then I would ask a question, they would do some work, and we had this conversation, and I was able to help the student in real time. So that was a really powerful use of the Jamboard. Algebra tiles, students really appreciated. Not all of them. As we know, there are some students, it's not their favorite thing, but it was a good challenge for them. Other students found it really helped them access the work. And Desmos Activities, if you've never seen a Desmos Activity, if you come to Desmos Activities home, and if you create one, I'm just going to show you one that I created. So actually, let's go into the summative. I'm just going to anonymize quickly here. I've already anonymized, so these are not the students' names. These are the names of famous mathematicians. And students had screens to go through. So I could create these screens that students were going through, and this is what they were working on. These were the tasks they had to do. But if in a summary, I could actually see each of the students and where they were working in those tasks. So if you're a math person, that's something that you want to explore some more. I can share more information and more videos about that with you if that's helpful to you. But students did really appreciate that. They liked the interactivity and the visuals that were there. And they liked how it was scaffolded, which was really interesting to me. So I have talked for plenty. What I would like you to do now is make sure you're logged into Minds Online. If you've never gone to Minds Online, Christy's going to put that link into the chat so that you can click on it. And once you're logged into Minds Online, if you go into the second link, that will let you self-register for my course. And then you can go in and have a look at it and ask questions as you do that. Oh, interesting. So David, you had a hard time with the Jamboards unless students were on tablets. The students did tell me it took them a while to get used to writing on there on a computer, but they said they were okay once they got used to it and once they accepted that maybe their handwriting wouldn't look the way they wanted it to. I think it was easiest on tablets, but they still were okay using it. Some liked it more than others, but I didn't get a lot of feedback about any difficulty. So just to clarify that instruction, folks, make sure you're logged into Minds Online and then click the second link. That should self-register you for my course. And then I can answer any questions or clarify anything about that as you start to navigate through there and have a look at how I have structured that. So if you're having any trouble there, just feel free to turn on your mic and ask any questions, and Christy and I can help guide you through that. So this is what you should see once you get into the course. How long did it take me to set this up, Angie? That's a really great question. It did take some time. This was for summer school, so I was kind of doing it at the end of June. It did take some time for sure, but honestly, the pre-planning, once I had the structure in my mind from the pre-planning, it went faster, but it did take time, and I would do it as I was going. If I was teaching, in fact, I am going to be teaching this year. I'm going to be pulled back to the classroom for part of my time, and I will give myself permission to build it as I go. And how do I like it compared to Google Classroom? That's an awesome question. Yes, Dawn, you're going into your standard LDSB Minds Online landing page to log in, and then click that second one, and that will let you log into or let you register for the course. I'm a Google girl, Dave, and I like Google a lot, and I used to struggle with Minds Online. It has improved a lot, and the functionality and the things I can do in Minds Online, I actually prefer it now. So once you're in, can somebody just let me know in the chat that you're able to get in with that link? That would make me feel better to know that everything's working. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So just go all around and have a look, and please pop any questions into the chat or just turn your mic on and let me know what your questions are. Or if there's something you'd like modeled or something you want a demo of, just let me know and I can throw that up on my screen and walk you through it. More about Loom. Hey, Deb. So if you go to Loom and there's actually an education page. This is my login page, but if you go to Loom and click on I'm in education, you can get yourself a free educator's login or account. And the reason I like it, so you can see all of my videos here. I can see how many views each video got. And at the beginning, there were more views than at the end of summer school. I think that's just human nature. And so some of them are screencast videos with my face in the corner, and some of them, oh, that's a lovely still. So some of them are, and then when you hover over them, you can see it's like a little GIF, and you'll notice that in the course as well, which is one of the other reasons I like it. And when you want to share a Loom video, so let's look on one that I can stand to look at. So if we click on a particular video and I want to share it, I can get the embed code. And if I put that embed code into Minds Online, it makes sure that the video is the right size, whether you're on a computer or a phone. And it also makes that little GIF so that when students see it, they see that it's moving and they know it's a video. And I think that helps them to be a little more motivated to click on and watch that video. I tried to make all of my Loom videos as brief as possible. If they were going to be long, I cut them into small pieces because I noticed that students would not watch the end of the long video because it will actually tell you, yes, it'll tell you how many students have had a look. So you can sort of look at that data. Does that answer your questions, Deb, or is there something else? Dawn, we can help you now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not seeing what you're saying about turning on to the second thing. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Okay, so there were two links. If you scroll up to Christy's comment, are you logged into Minds Online right now, Dawn?
Yes, I am.
So now that you're logged in, just come back up and click on this bit.ly. Christy, I wonder if you could just paste it at the bottom of the chat now to make it easier for Dawn to find. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Brett. So click on that now, Dawn.
Hang tight, I'm just jumping between screens. I don't want to hold everybody up.
It's all good. That's what this is for.
Okay, so sorry. So what I am seeing right now on my screen, and thank you everybody, sorry for the delay here, is that okay, so I'm re-entering Minds Online, and as soon as it opens for mine, I'm seeing the happy good morning Dawn, how pleasant. So on the right-hand side, so I'm looking at your screen versus looking at my screen.
Your screen won't look like mine yet. You have to self-register for the course first. So do you get an instruction there once you click on that link?
Okay, so when you say clicking on the link, I'm
the one that Brett and Christy just shared at the bottom of the chat.
Okay, so I'll go back in and I'm going to go see what Brett has put. Hi there, Brett. Okay, sorry. Okay, so if again, because I don't want to hold folks up, so I'll take a look around. I see Brett's link, so I'll
click Brett's link.
Yeah. Okay.
So while you're clicking on that, Dawn, I'm just going to answer Rosemary and Don Ash's question. You're both asking about what tech students used. Some used computers. I had some using phones and tablets. They seem to be able to use the tools on either. So I think iPads are fine. There's actually an app for Minds Online, which is quite a good app. So Lori, if you want to access Jamboard, you can do a couple things. If you're in, let's say you're in your drive and you go to New and you go More under all the Google Docs, the normal things, Google Jamboard's in there now. Or the other thing you can do is just open a new tab and go to your Google Waffle up here, and Jamboard should be down there as well. So that's two ways to get to Jamboard. And I don't know that if it's in the Google Suite on the landing page. I'll ask Mark Lee that question. That's a really great question, because on our landing page, we can get to all the other Google apps right from here. No, it's not in there, is it? Well, we'll just have to ask Mr. Mark Lee after today is over and see what he can do about that. Any other questions? Don, are you in?
Jackie, I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about how students submit work to you.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
So my gradebook, Deb, I just used Google Sheets. So Christy is asking a really important question for those of you who haven't used Minds Online, and I had to figure this one out. Assignments in Minds Online are a little bit unexpected. So when we look at the assignments widget, and when you click on the assignments page, it lists all of the assignments that you have, but the actual assignment is given to students in the content. So if we go into the content, all of our units are here. You navigate by opening a unit by clicking the triangle, and it shows you all the topics inside. So in Reflect, there was an assignment students had to do. And the way I deal with this was I made a Google Doc, but I created it as a template. So it's kind of like forcing students to make a copy, but it's making them use a template. So once it shows up, they can see what the assignment is. They click on this Use Template button, and then they've got a Google Doc to work in as usual. Once they've completed that, they do need to download that as a PDF. And then what they do is they go to the assignment and they attach a file to that assignment. And now if that's something you've never done or your students have never done, I'm going to show you some videos that are in here that are also in the Minds Online support course that I made for students. So if we look at tech tools and using Minds Online under the introductions and course information here, these are all YouTube videos that you can share directly with your students. If you don't know how to submit an assignment or download a document or do any of the things in Minds Online, each of those takes you to a video. And what I did in this course was the first time students had to submit an assignment, I made a Loom video showing them how to do it. So it was, here's your first assignment, this is how you're going to do it. And I would just repeat that for the first few times. And after they had done it a couple of times, I would assume they knew how, and I would just remove that scaffold. But I always had it up here so that if they needed to go back. And any other tech tools, I always showed them a video of how to use it as they needed it. But then I just sort of put a list of them right at the beginning. So if there was ever anything they needed to know how to do, they could go and find that themselves. So Brett, that's a really great question about the content. Oh, yay, Dawn, you're in. That's great. Brett, the content, so there are ways in Minds Online to release content as they complete something. I gave myself permission to not do all the things at the beginning. And so using things like intelligent agents and things like that, that I know the Swains are going to talk about today, I didn't worry a lot about that. The one thing I did do was the consolidation videos I did create from student work. And so I would always wait until many of the students had completed the Explore the Math task. And then I would select and sequence student work in Jamboard, make a screencast video. And so that was never there until the students had a chance to do it, because the Explore the Math task is like in the classroom when we start with a rich problem to get them thinking about things. I didn't want them to skip ahead to the consolidate video. That being said, my students worked really asynchronously, and so sometimes that was up, but I didn't find that they skipped ahead. They would actually just follow the process. So I didn't worry a lot about that releasing, but the summatives I only put up on the day that the summatives were happening. I didn't put a time limit on them, but I did just put them up on the day that they needed to complete those summatives. When they submit, they cannot see each other's assignment. They can. I'm the only one that sees that assignment, and then if we look at my view, so if we go back to my home page, the course home, every time they would submit something, I would get a notification and updates here, and it would tell me I've got something I need to mark here, and it shows me here where the new submissions are, and I could either click on that or just click on the name of the assignment. And here's Christy's work. She tested this for me this morning, left me a lovely note, and I could then open her assignment. And then one of the things I love about Minds Online is these great annotation tools. So I could write rate on her work if I want to. I could add a sticky note to give her some feedback if I want to. And I could record a video right here using the embedded video tool, or an audio, type some final feedback here. And I could also attach a rubric, which would show up beside it, and use that to evaluate the work. And then once I publish that, Chrissy will get a notification now that says you have some unread feedback. And I can see now when I look at the assignments that I don't have any new submissions, but I have completed, and one student has completed work, and I have evaluated that work. Any other comments or questions?
Sorry, Jackie. Did you say that one of the benefits of this is you can kind of see who's logged on, who's done what? Kind of
Yes.
to, yeah.
Would you like to see that?
Sure.
So if we go into the class list, I can see all of you. So here you all are. I can see who's online right now. That's what the green dot tells me. And I can also see what everyone's accessed. So I can either list this by last name over here, or if I want to know who's been in there recently, this is how I took attendance in summer school. I would just make this from the most recent at the top and see who'd logged in today. So you can see, oh, look at Prisha the Slacker. She hasn't been in since August 20th. But if I switch it to the most recent, I can see that Brett was in most recently. And then if I click on this little down arrow, I can view Brett's progress. But let's do that to you, Dave, instead of Brett. So if we go to Dave Casey down here, I can view his progress. And I can see which of the content you visited, how much time you spent there by clicking this little button. And so I can see at which time you accessed each of these parts of the course and how much time you spent on each one. So that is a tool that we can use to measure student engagement. So sometimes I would look and see my students aren't completing their formatives. But if I would go in here, I'd say, actually, they've looked at a lot of this content. They must be stuck on something. And I could reach out and say, hey, you okay? I noticed you're in the content, but you haven't submitted the formative yet. What can I do to support you? Jennifer, to answer your question, yes, I would have access to the feedback once it's returned to the student. It's still there for me. And Eva, to answer your question, I think that that's just the default, that assignments are just for me. The attendance screen, so Sean, the top button that says class list up here, that's where I started. I'll go a little more slowly. So I went class list, and then I adjusted this right screen here to see when they last accessed. And just by clicking that, it'll go from the oldest to newest, or newest to oldest. And that allows me to see, okay, if I'm taking attendance for August 26th, I can see all these students have been in, except for Prisha. I'm going to mark her absent today.
What does the class engagement button tell you?
I'm not sure. I don't use that one. Let's see. Okay, that's not something I've used, but it does tell me the last time they visited. So maybe that would have been a better one. Oh, and it does look like I can email the class from that one. So I could click on this and email all of you internally to Minds Online, which is the tool that we used in summer school. Don, that's a good question. I did not tell them that I could see that, and I only used it when I needed to. Oh, if you click on the name, it takes you to the progress as well. I thought if you clicked on the name Hudabi, I would email Rosemary. Let's see what that's going to do. Yeah, for me, when I click on the name, it takes me to an email. So that's why I was using that chevron beside the name. On the class engagement page, okay. There we go. So if I click on your name, I should be able to see your engagement. Oh, look at that. Awesome. Thank you. Very cool. So I'm noticing that it's 9:45. And I'm wondering if there are any last questions before we head out, so that those of us who have something at 10 o'clock can maybe grab a coffee and stretch our legs before starting another session. Any other questions or anything you want to see? Which app should students download? Let me find what it's called. I believe it's called the Brightspace app. But under here, here's a link to the YouTube video. I think it has a picture of it on there. There we go. Brightspace Pulse app is the one. And yes, the recording will be available. They're all going to be placed into Minds Online. The original email we got from either Jane Douglas or Steph Sartor to the system has a link to where all of those videos will be stored. So once some sessions are over, I'll throw that on YouTube and then share the link to the Minds Online support space.
Jackie, there was just one question there from Sean about
yeah.
being able to see, but I think it is a student versus instructor thing.
Absolutely. So you are all enrolled as students right now. And so I have the instructor view. So in your own course as the teacher, you would have the same view as me. Thanks for coming, everybody. So nice to see all of you. And if you have any questions later on, feel free to pop me an email anytime.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Yeah.
These are all going to be available in Minds Online after, right? And
Totally.
I suppose you might send out some link for us to be able to find it or directions.
So it'll be in Minds Online support. I'm not 100% sure of where, but I think it'll be pretty clear where. Let's have a quick look. So if we go, oh, I don't want to.
From the homepage, like you mean?
So do all of you know where the Minds Online support resource is? So here's my landing page. If you go down, oh, and here's a link to the app up here. Look at that. If you go down to LDSB developed resource spaces here, are you with me, Sean?
Yeah.
And if you click on that, there are all sorts of different places you can go. Minds Online support right here. If you click on that, you can self-register, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'm already registered. So that's
just for Summer Institute or whatever.
Sorry, say that again.
Will it be for Summer Institute that I'm registering there, or?
No, you're registering for this. It's a Minds Online. It's not really a course. It's just a space where we are putting a lot of supports, and then you'll be able to get there from here. I'm not sure what that button's going to look like. I imagine it'll just come up in the announcements here, and there'll be a link to where all those videos are.
Okay. So because I just registered for like a course.
Okay.
And then it's taken me there. So I guess at some point the Summer Institute stuff will show up there.
It will. I imagine it'll be, tomorrow after we've all finished presenting.
Okay.
But if you go to find it, you can't find it, pop me an email and I can send you a direct link, because by then I'll know where it is, because I will have posted the video there.
Okay. Because I missed the first 15 minutes or so. So
okay.
I missed it. Just a quick question. Jamboard, that seems like an online smart notebook, basically?
Ish. It's a little different functionality. It's more like an online place for students to collaborate. So like you can have students work. It's like an online whiteboard. When you open a brand new Jamboard, so if we just go and say, okay, let's make a new Jamboard, it's just you can place images and text and drawing. And so if we make a new one, you can see I really like Jamboard.
If I were to post this, then all the kids who log in would have access to the same one. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And you can have up to 20 screens. So you can put like sticky notes on here. You can copy images into here just by copying and pasting.
Yeah, I just played around with it and found it all.
Yeah.
So that's good to know.
And you can also, like, if you have a slide you really like, you can duplicate it and create it for all the students. Like, that's what I do. I put up a problem and then duplicate it like 20 times for the kids to all work in their own space. Or you could say, like, here are your random groups for today. These 3 students are on screen 1. These 3 students are on screen 2, and so on.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we hop off, everybody?
Great.
Amy, I totally agree. I was sad to miss what other summer school teachers were up to. that was my feedback to our principal. I would love more time to share ideas with everybody and hear what other people are doing. Okay, any questions before I sign off, friends? Is there a random group maker in Brightspace? Not that I know of, Deb, but there are some really great ones online. If you just Google like random group creator, there are lots of them. I know the app that folks like is Team Shake, but that's an iPad app. In Jamboard, if they're all in the same one, Brett, they can edit each other's work. So that's something that you do need to watch out for.
Did you have issues with that, Jackie?
Not a single one.
Okay.
Good question, Brett. For my presentation, I just decided to use Jamboard because it was a new tool I was sharing. Google Slides is probably a better presenting software, but Jamboard is nice because you can write on it with handwriting in a way that you can't really on Google Slides. But in terms of presenting as a teacher, Google Slides is just as good. And in fact, Google Slides, I think, is good for other types of collaboration. There were some assignments that I posted for students to work on that I did in Google Slides because it made more sense. Like there are some tasks where I wanted them to be able to move numbers around, and that made more sense in Google Slides. And if you wanted to, say, have algebra tiles that they could, you could have like lots of copies for them to pull out, I think Google Slides would work better for that. So Jamboard's more like a whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard. I didn't get any questions about it, Deb. Deb's asking if parents were surprised about a portfolio instead of an exam. I didn't get a single question. I was ready for like all the questions and I didn't get any, which was interesting. I know, they were really open-minded. They were just, I think they were happy their students were engaged and succeeding. And by the time we got to the end of the course, they weren't as worried anymore. I had a lot more conversations with parents at the beginning about students that, why, what barriers they might have to engagement and to success in math. Those were the conversations we had, much more than what the final summative assessment looked like. Okay, I'm going to pop out, folks, but so nice to see all of you. And hopefully I will see you all in person someday soon. Take care.